Thank you, John Fudens, Dr. John Fudens, for taking this interview. I first came across your work by looking up rabies and dog vaccinations, and you had an article named The Big Scam. Would you like to talk about your past and how you came to write this article?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's been a number of movements in my life, deciding very early when I was a kid in Queens to be a doctor and then be a veterinarian. And then I became a veterinarian, and then I went into the holistic side of it. And now, as I said, I'm a doctor of homeopathy. I'm not a conventional vet anymore. But my journey into the law started in September of 1984. My whole life, and I'm sure you know this, knowledge is power. And the more power, the more knowledge a person has, the better they're able to survive and withstand what's going on in this planet with all the criminality and suppression, etc. So in September of '84, I attended a holistic veterinary conference in San Antonio, Texas. And I met a veterinarian there from Minnesota, and we got talking about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and income tax, etc. And he said, you need to get two books. One book was the Social Security Scam by a guy by the name of Shift. And the other book was that you don't have to file 1040 tax returns and pay income tax. It's all voluntary. So I got those two books and I read them from cover to cover. And my eyes really opened up as far as the scam and the suppression that goes on. And I'm just going to talk about America at this point, but it happens all across the planet, so to speak, about these people, the elitists that are in the power positions, and the only thing they care about is control, domination, money, and enslaving us under the circumstances. So that basically started my journey into studying the law, all aspects of the law. I'm not a lawyer by any stretch of the imagination, but I have studied in my career constitutional law, common law, admiralty law, and the municipal policy law. And it has allowed me to get to the state where I am at this particular point. So in October of '89, I sold my practice and my hospital on Long Island, and I walked away from conventional medicine. So I moved down to Florida for various reasons, and I opened up the Affinity Holistic Clinic in Clearwater, the first clinic for animals, holistic clinic in the state of Florida. But then the state came after me, the Board of Veterinary Medicine, the Vets and Animal Control, and the lawyers and the politicians and the Department of Professional Regulations in Florida came after me. And I started to study Florida statutes. And I know that I made a mistake by passing the license to practice veterinary medicine in Florida when I was not practicing it. I was doing a homeopathy and the holistic approach. So I wound up giving my license back in New York and Florida. And sure enough, in the fall of '94, I got arrested and put in jail for practicing veterinary medicine without a license. And of course, a year later, we went to a district court before a jury. And after 15 minutes of deliberation, the jury found me not guilty. And it's the first case in the history of the United States that was like that, where a professional gave back the license, was arrested, and yet found not guilty. The subject that I wrote was during this time, Rabies, the Big Scam. I looked at this even when I was a conventional medicine veterinarian in New York. The rabies issue is a human health issue, Gilberto, okay, because it's such a profound disease that once a human or animal, comes down with rabies, it's fatal. There is no known cure for the rabies. And I've seen both animals and humans in the two forms of rabies, which is the dumb form and the vicious form. And it's not pleasant under any circumstances. So the rabies issue is a human health issue. Now, how do you want to protect the humans? You have to go to the animals that are closest to the human, which is the dogs and cats that are in our lives as our pets. Now, and I'm talking just the United States, the 4 favorite animals that come down with rabies in the environment that present a threat to the dogs and cats and then the humans are skunk, raccoon, bat, and skunk, raccoon, bat. Oh God, wait, skunk, raccoon, bat. There's 4 of them there, and suddenly I've got a brain fart here that I can't come up with the other animal at this point. I'll think about it here in a minute, and I'll get it.
Mhm.
These 4 animals are in the environment of the United States. They're the ones that carry the rabies virus that can be transmitted to a dog or cat. Now, the rabies virus is a neurotrophic virus. That means it attacks the nervous system of the animal or the human. It is only presented by the bite of an animal that has the rabies virus in the saliva. You okay with me so far?
Yes.
It cannot be transmitted any other way. It's in the virus is in the saliva. And when an animal that carries that virus bites another animal or a human, that rabies virus attaches itself to the nervous system of that animal or that person. It finds a nerve, travels on the nerve, and it replicates itself up to the spinal cord, and then it goes up into the brain. And the brain is called the hippocampus. That's in the middle portion of the brain. And it then eventually causes respiratory and cardiac arrest and death in the animal or the person's eyes. So I looked at this rabies issue, and I'm saying, okay, if this is the particular case, which it is, why is there such a push on having animals vaccinated for rabies when there's no possible chance of them getting the rabies from an animal that has the rabies? A little toy poodle, 3-pound toy poodle in New York City that goes on a pee pad, that animal is not going to come down with rabies. It's not going to be bitten by a rabbit or a rat or a bat or a skunk or a fox or anything of that. Now, raccoon. The raccoon is the other 4th animal. It's not going to be bitten. Why is it being pushed that way? Well, the answer is because of power, control, domination, and money. Now, the United States has millions and millions of laws on the book. Every one of us, even as we're sitting here right now, are guilty of violating some sort of law that we have no idea exists. What is a law, Gilberto? It's words put on a piece of paper by a person or persons who want to make us do something we ordinarily would not do, or to prevent us from doing something that we ordinarily would do. A law is a control and enslavement mechanism on humans for behavior compliance.
Could we be specific? Like, because the law that I discovered that exists is once your dog is over 4 months or something, you are required to get a license for it. That way, that every year you have to renew a vaccination, or I guess somehow every 3 years for some other vaccination. But you just have to repeat the cycle. So can you explain like this law? How did this? I don't know if you remembered when it came into place. Like, yeah, can you expand on that?
Yeah. Again, animal control. It's a behavior situation. The veterinarians, the animal control, the lawyers, the politicians, the bureaucrats, they all got together on this particular issue, okay? And they decided that one way to control a person and hopefully prevent a person from getting the disease rabies is to have every animal licensed, okay? You pay a tax. If they're not spayed, it's a higher tax. If they're spayed, it's a lower tax. But they insist on the rabies vaccination because it's such a health issue with human beings under the circumstances, okay? So one way to get compliance is to say, hey, you get a license, you pay a tax, and you get the vaccines. If you don't, we're going to punish you. And I have had hundreds of cases in my career all over the country of people calling up, threatening to have their animals taken from them. I've had people fined and brought into court before a judge because they wouldn't cooperate on getting a license and a rabies vaccine.
Wow.
It's a control mechanism, Gilberto. Okay, now let's look at the rabies vaccine. Okay, you have two types of vaccines. You have a killed and a modified live virus vaccine. This is all the vaccines. Let's take the rabies. The rabies is a killed virus vaccine. That means the rabies virus was killed by either heat or chemicals. But there's a protein covering of the virus. So when that is injected into an animal or a person, it stimulates the immune system of that animal or person to produce antibodies, the protein antibodies against the virus. So yes, the vaccines work to some degree in producing immunity, but there's a price to pay because of the damage that the vaccines cause over and above producing the antibodies. And I'll come to that in a minute. Now you have a modified live virus vaccine. Now this is where they take the virus and they plant it on agar plates. And then they take that and go to another one and another one and another one. And the vaccines companies have found that after a certain serial plating, maybe something like 20, 30, or 40 of them, that virus loses the ability in most cases to cause the disease, but it's still strong enough to produce the immunity. The modified live virus vaccines are more potent than the killed. You get more and better protection and immunity, but there's a greater risk of coming down with the disease if that virus breaks. You with me so far?
So it's more risky.
It's more risky under the circumstances. So that's why you want to prefer, in the rabies case, the killed rabies. It still produces the immunity, but it doesn't last as long as the modified live virus. So now, the veterinarians, the politicians, the lawyers, they come up with these arbitrary situations, and they're all arbitrary. There's not really based on a lot of scientific data. They come up with these arbitrary situations that you need the rabies by, say, 4 months of age, something of that particular nature. Well, that particular dog or cat, their immune system is not developed enough to produce the type of immunity that you would expect at 4 months of age. It's better to wait 8, 9, 10 months of age, maybe a year. But if you wait that long, you're not necessarily in compliance with the control mechanism that these other people who have a vested interest in making money want to put upon you. I know this sounds crazy, but it's the truth. I'm not making any of this stuff up. After 60 years of confronting this stuff, I know what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, I also read a Reddit post of people talking about this in Orange County, and there's some people that are like, they say, yeah, well, it funds the poop bags and the trails or something, and of course you have to pay a license. It's like a car or something like that, and it's just they're kind of, I don't know, offending people who don't fall in line. And there's people that obviously are saying like, what is this? It's just like a Chihuahua. You're seeing a Chihuahua as like a threat or something, and like everybody's a killer pit bull owner.
Yeah, well, a lot of it is stupidity. But again, you have to think of power, control, domination, and money. That's what drives these evil people, and they are evil to a large extent to do some of the things that they're doing. You can take a 2-pound Chihuahua and it gets the same type of vaccine, the quantity of rabies vaccine, as a 150-pound Saint Bernard gets. Now, where is that scientific evidence, Gilberto? I mean, does that truly make sense to anybody who's not even a scientist or a veterinarian?
Have you seen like damage or I had a question, like obviously putting a needle in a dog for like this situation, they're kind of like they're gonna squeal or be uncomfortable or something, bark. So like what other effects does injecting that stuff have?
All right, your audience, and hopefully you're going to produce this then for them. Anybody listening to this video needs to look up on the internet vaccinosis, the word vaccinosis, and the rabies miasm. They have to look that up. They're going to get a wealth of information on the danger of all vaccines, including the COVID for humans, the measles, rubella. It doesn't matter. Vaccinosis and the rabies miasm. Now, the rabies vaccines are notorious for producing cancer at the injection site, particularly in cats more than dogs. The rabies vaccine The laboratories, the vaccine companies say it has to be given intramuscular. You got to put it in the muscle, and that is the hamstring muscle in the leg. And as a conventional veterinarian, I was finding cancer in the leg, and the only operation is to remove the leg on that animal to remove the cancer caused by the rabies vaccine. So now they're giving him underneath the skin. It tends to cause less of a cancer, but the rabies vaccine can still cause cancer in the animals if they're susceptible to that type of injury from the vaccines, whether it's given IM or sub-Q. But then you have the immunity factor. That young animal has to have an immune system that's willing to respond to the rabies vaccine to produce the protein antibodies for immunity. And that has some maturity factor involved. It used to be you had to be at least 6 months of age. Now they're moving it down to 4 months. Why? To get more compliance under the circumstances and to get more people on board to have the vaccine and to have the tag so they can charge you 25 or 35 or whatever the tax happens to be to get a tag on your animal. Now, there was a study done, and this woman is connected with the University of California. I don't know if she's still there or not, but in the 80s, I took some homeopathic seminars, and she was there. She's a researcher on the vaccines for animals in particular, and her study is absolutely spot on. She determined that if you give an animal one rabies vaccine, they are protected 75% of the time for the rest of their life against that disease. If you give them 2 vaccines separated by about a year, every animal is 100% protected for the rest of its life. 2 vaccines, Gilbert. Now, why? If you get 100% protection after 2 vaccines, why do you need any more vaccines after that particular point? Do you? No, you don't. Now, they have the titer. The vaccines have the titer, okay? All vaccines will produce a titer. That's the protein antibodies that are in the bloodstream. And you can draw blood out, run the titers, and you can see that the animal or the person is immunized properly against a particular disease. When I was in Florida and I wrote this article and I was doing battle with the veterinarians and the politicians, we, with other people in the humane groups of animals, we petitioned the Florida Senate for having an exemption on the titer. In other words, if a blood test was drawn and the titer produced that the animal was vaccinated against distemper, hepatitis, rabies, whatever it happened to be, they didn't need the rabies and they didn't need the vaccines. That was defeated in the Senate. There was one senator in Florida who was paid a lot of money by the vaccine companies, and he pushed through an amendment that said we could not allow the titer to determine the vaccines as far as the animal is concerned. So even if you could prove your animal is protected, immunized-wise, you still had to get the vaccines. You see where this power, control, domination, and money comes into play here with these politicians and lawyers and the MDs and the vets?
Yeah, so basically, if you know who to pay off, you can get your law passed, and your companies will make a lot of money. And if people don't make enough noise about it, if you trick them to think it's necessary, you know, nothing will happen for like 40 years.
Look at the tax code in the United States, all the tax loopholes. Who takes advantage of them? Millionaires and billionaires. Why? Because they contribute campaign funds to the politicians that put the loopholes in the tax codes. You and I don't have those loopholes.
Yeah, I mean, people
Not
take
like,
advantage of deductions and like you
not
hear
only
of 6,000.
a millionaire or a billionaire. I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, there's books about it, and you know, it's really just a big game that people play. So
It's a criminal enterprise.
yeah, and essentially, what would you give like advice to people who are in that situation, like you mentioned? Like I heard in the Reddit, people they go door to door knocking to see if you have a dog. If there's dogs barking, then they mark it like, I don't know, as a dog house, and they send you mail.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's certain things like that.
what would you recommend to somebody being like hunted down by the animal services or vets? I don't know. You mentioned they go to court sometimes.
the people should look up vaccinosis and the rabies miasm, get themselves hatted on this as to the health damage that occurs from the vaccines, okay? The second thing that you should do, and this is what I do with hundreds and hundreds of clients over years, is whatever locality you're in, go to town hall or animal control, whatever it happens to be, and find out the yearly rabies incidence in your locality, okay? Find out how many rabies cases are in your town or your village or your location. But now you have to watch for if they put wildlife into the pet community. They may say, I'm only using an example, they may say, well, this past year there was 10 animals diagnosed with rabies. The average dog or cat owner is going to assume, oh my gosh, there was 10 dogs or cats down with rabies. No, no, no. They were all wildlife. There were no recorded cases of dogs or cats with rabies. It was all wildlife. So now you have more information, and what you have to do is not get started with animal control first and foremost. The veterinarians will push like hell to get you to get a tag and a license on your dog or cat, because once you're in the computer system, they've got you. Now you're forced to get the rabies. See, the veterinarians work with animal control. They may give the rabies vaccine and the license, but animal control may kick back $5 or $10 to the veterinarian under the circumstances. So you don't always go to animal control. You may work through the veterinarian, but the veterinarian is working with animal control. Why? The veterinarian has a license. They don't want anybody to come after that license, because without the license, they can't practice veterinary medicine. I gave my license back like an idiot, but I'm healthier because of it. And now they leave me alone. They don't come after me. So a pet owner has to educate themselves as to what is happening in their locality. If they're on Central Park East in New York City, what in God's name is any rabies case even in a wildlife in New York City? So why do you have to get the rabies vaccine? Again, it's politics and it's money. So if you don't get into the system, then the system is not going to come after you. But as you mentioned, there are cases they can go door to door, they hear a dog, or you're out walking your animal, something of that particular nature. What you do is you find out what the rabies tag is. And the rabies tag has a certain shape and color depending on the locality. So you go to a pet shop, something like that, and you get, suppose it's a red bone. You get an ID tag, red bone, clip it to the collar with your name and address on it. Anybody say, oh, red bone, that must be a rabies tag. They're fine. They leave you alone. They're not going to run up there to see that that red bone is not a rabies tag, or whatever the color or shape happens to be. You have to play the game to protect yourself and your animals from these people who are dangerous and do their thing, so to speak, that is not always in anybody's best interest.
Yeah, I think in Monterey County, the color of the tag is like a little square blue one. And I think
every locality has a different color and shape. So you get an ID tag, make it look like it's the rabies tag, okay? Remember, rabies has to be transmitted by the bite of an animal that has the rabies. If a person or an animal gets bitten by a dog or a cat, that doesn't mean it's rabies. That dog or cat had to have rabies to transmit that disease to the animal or the person. Now, you may have a bite wound, gets infected, has to be taken care of, but you're not going to get rabies unless the animal has rabies to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking up earlier, I don't know why, like pit bull attacks, and there was some scary videos, but usually, like, can you tell if a dog has rabies? Like, they act kind of funny. I mean, how would somebody protect themselves from rabies just to
But the usual procedure right now in most communities around the country, if a person is bitten by a dog, there's a quarantine period that varies from 10 to 15 days. Now, the animal either has to be quarantined in a kennel in animal control, or you can quarantine it at your own home with visits by the animal control officer. So that quarantine period is usually 10 days, sometimes it's 15. That animal is observed during that time. if there's any evidence of the animal getting sick with either the dumb form of rabies or the vicious form, then the animal is taken away and euthanized. And then the head is separated, go to the lab and look for the antibodies in the brain to prove that it had rabies. If the animal is healthy at the end of that quarantine period, in all probability, you'll be fined, forced to get the rabies if you haven't had the rabies, but then you can get your animal back again. Now, the kicker is sometimes animal control will charge you every day a fee for keeping your animal. But if you stand your ground, you can say, no, I'm going to keep my animal in my house. You can come and visit every day if you want. I don't care, but I'm not putting my animal in your cage facilities at animal control and paying you money when I can keep it at home and take care of it. But you want to visit every day? That's fine and dandy. So that's the quarantine period, so to speak, as far as watching the animal to make sure it doesn't have rabies.
Mm-hmm. And also, I was going to ask you questions about spaying and neutering dogs, and like, is that like, I don't know, is that wrong or in some type of way? Because, yeah, what do you think about that? Because you also mentioned in the licenses they have a discount, like a 50% off or something.
No, they have a graduated fee, so to speak. If the animal is not neutered, you pay a higher fee because they don't want you to have any unwanted dogs or pups that are kittens, because there's so many of them. There's millions that basically are put to sleep every year because nobody wants to adopt them. But if they're sterilized, it's a cheaper fee. You have a cat. Have a cat. You honestly can't keep a male cat without altering him. They spray, their urine is terribly offensive, and they don't want to stay in the house because they're driven by the testosterone. So your male cat has to be altered to make him a pet in the house. Now, you have your female cat. Normally, they will come and eat 2 to 3 times a year, at least. They'll cry, they'll meow, they want to get outside to get to a male, whatever it is. They're not a very good house pet when they're driven by their hormones, whether it's male or female. So you have the female spayed. Now you have a female dog. All my dogs were females, and I all spayed them when I was a vet. Those female dogs will come and heat at least twice a year. If they get pregnant, you got more puppies under the circumstances. When they come and heat, they're going to bleed around the house, which is aesthetically unpleasant. They want to get outside to a male. So a female dog is very difficult to keep if you don't spay her. Now, if she's 2 or 3 pound Chihuahua up on a high rise on the 10th floor in New York City or Chicago, that's a different story. She's not going to have access to a male dog and wind up with an unwanted pregnancy. So for the most part, a female dog has to be spayed also, just for the aesthetics and to keep it from producing more puppies. Because as I said, there's millions of them every year that are put to sleep because nobody wants them. Now, the male dog may or may not be altered. It depends on several characteristics. A male dog should be altered if they're very sexually active, okay? They jump on people, they jump on children, they're humping pillows around the house. In other words, they're driven by their hormones, all right? And it's unpleasant, so you alter them to remove the hormones. The second thing is, if you have a male dog that is extremely vicious and nasty and is a danger to people and the environment, but you don't want to put them down and get rid of them, you alter them in hopes that maybe removing the testosterone tones them down a bit, and then maybe they're more trainable by somebody who can teach them more manners. There's a third reason why you would alter a male dog, and that's later on in life. They will develop a cancer of the testicles. And removing the testicles that are cancerous tends to enlarge their health. You can hang on to them longer, so to speak. So it's behavior, sexuality, and health-wise with the male dogs to alter them. Otherwise, leave the male dog alone. If they're not being obnoxious and you don't have a problem with them, leave them the hell alone. But the vets will push that. Why? Because they get hundreds of dollars to surgery, anesthesia, and hospitalization, and drugs, and everything else. Make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a one size fits all, and whoever falls for it, kind of.
That's exactly right. Everybody is thrown into the same lump, no matter what the situation and circumstances happen to be. That's one of the main reason I wrote that article And that article has been all over the world on the internet, the rabies miasm, and everything I wrote. This was in the early 90s. So, I mean, hell, you're talking what, 30, 35 years ago? Everything in that article pertains to today, to be perfectly frank about it. And I get calls on that article all the time from people who, with this rabies situation and the tags and animal control, and I help them out as best I can. But, you know, a lot of people are fearful, and it's one emotion that you can control a human being is you put fear into them. Fear that you're going to punish them. You don't file 1040s and pay taxes. You don't get the rabies vaccine. You don't get the tag. You don't get the driver's license. You don't do this. You don't do that. We're going to punish you.
Yeah, I mean, who's more likely to not pay that license? Probably like financially, people that aren't financially well off that have a bunch of dogs. They're just gonna not do it. They're gonna break the law. Like, what are they gonna do?
Yeah, they don't care. They could chain them up in the yard, something like that. Do you honestly think that the homeless or the people on poor or poverty levels or whatever it happens to be, do you honestly think they're going to obey the law, get a license? Hey, they can't even put food on the table in some cases. They're going to pay money for a rabies vaccine and a license for their dog or their cat. They're going to violate the law. And invariably, animal control will not go after those people, Gilberto. They'll go after middle class or upper lower class or lower high class. What the people who can afford it, they'll go after them because they know they can get them with the money and the license fee because they're afraid of being punished. The people having a hard time surviving, they're not afraid of being punished.
Yeah, they have little to lose, right? So, and you mentioned, well, yeah, what do you think about like having to? I had a couple more questions here. Yeah, I'll explain a little bit about laws and how they use fear to kind of affect people's actions pretty much. And like you mentioned, colorable law, or I've heard other people mention like corporatism, stuff like that.
All right. Remember, a law make you do something you don't want to do to prevent you from doing something you want to do. Okay. The law profession is probably one of the most corrupt and evil professions on the planet. From my studies, there are more lawyers in the United States than there is in the rest of the world put together. Now, the lawyers, they're part of the judicial branch of our government. You have legislative, executive, judicial branch, okay? So a lawyer does not have a license to practice in that state. What they get is a barcode from the Supreme Court of that particular state. They get a number that says, okay, now you can practice law in this state because the Supreme Court judges have given you this barcode, okay? Now, if you look at the Constitution of the United States, you got a legislative, executive, and judicial branch. The legislative branch, the politicians pass the laws that make us criminals and enslave us, okay? The executive branch is where the cops are. They enforce the laws of the legislative branch. The judicial branch then adjudicates the crimes against us with a fine or a jail. Now, the Constitution says separation of powers. All the branches are equal but separate from one another. Now, Gilberto, if the lawyer has their loyalty to the judicial branch of government, what the hell are they doing being elected president, being senator, and representative? You have lawyers in the executive branch and the legislative branch. Is that a violation of the separation? I'm not making this up. It's in the Constitution. Is that a violation of separation of powers?
Yeah, like you would think a judge, if a lawyer is comparable to a judge wouldn't just start being like a senator and taking money, like type stuff. They're supposed to be liking justice, you know, serving justice.
You got a lawyer that is a senator. That senator is passing laws, or a House of Representative, okay? They're passing laws to enslave us, to make us criminals, to modify our behavior, to control us. That's a law. That's a lawyer, okay? Now, if you get into trouble, where are you going to go to get out of the trouble? You're going to seek a lawyer, aren't you? The lawyer puts you in the hole. Now you're going to seek a lawyer to try to get you out of the hole or minimize the consequences of you being in the hole. That's why the law there's no justice in America anymore. There really isn't. Now, some of the lawyers are pretty good, the men and women, pretty good. But for the most part, they're part of the corrupt system that enslaves us.
Yeah, because sometimes I think about like there's a movie, The Devil's Advocate, and you think about a lawyer's job is to like win for their client, whether they did the crime or not. So you're gonna, I guess, lie somehow, or I don't know, not be truthful to what you actually to like what's real justice, I guess, if you're a criminal defense attorney.
Yeah, everybody is innocent until proven guilty. I get that. I'm not denying that under the circumstances, but there's something wrong with a lawyer passing a law to make me a criminal, and then I got to go to a lawyer to get myself out of the criminal action that another lawyer put me in by passing a law. And then they use the loopholes, the technicalities. You know, if somebody is guilty of murder and rape and terrorism under the circumstances, and it's obvious, a lawyer's job should not be to get that person free of their crime on a technicality. I mean, if everybody screws up, if we make mistakes, we should pay for it. We should make amends some way, somehow. And if you murder a person, but because the Miranda right was not given properly under the circumstances, and then the DA is a lawyer now, a lawyer says, I don't think I'm going to take that case to court. I may not win, and I may not get my next advancement because I might want to run for attorney general or the governor of the state or something like that, so I'll let it pass. But his loved one was not the one that was murdered or raped by this criminal. The justice system is not justice anymore under the circumstances. You can look day after week after month what is happening around this country with lawyers, with judges and politicians. Most of your politicians are lawyers. Most of your bureaucrats in the swamp and the administrative state are lawyers. I don't trust any lawyer. They're not my friend, and the cops the same. They're not my friends under the circumstances. They look at me as a criminal, and they'll wait and see if they can charge me with something. But I know enough about the law right now. I've been arrested 3 times down there in Florida, and I won every time because I'll fight, and I know the law, and I'm not here shooting my mouth off, Gilberto. Okay, I studied the law enough that I know what I can do, what I can't do, and what they can do and what they can't do. And I'm willing to fight, okay? Now, maybe most people will want to live on their knees and lick the boots of their enslavers just so they don't get hurt and that they can live day to day. No, no, no. I'm going to stand on my feet to be free and independent. And if it means I get wounded or lose the body, so be it under the circumstances. But to be free and independent is the utmost importance to me. And knowledge is power, as I said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But not many people are like that.
How do you, like, how can we use a court system? I don't know. People say common law. I had a guest the other time that said common law is a good way to, like, I guess, sort out morality or what punishment should be, because there's like jury. I looked into it. I guess there's a jury that can decide if you actually did something wrong or right.
It's called jury nullification.
Mm-hmm.
Common law goes back to the Magna Carta in England. When the knights revolted against the evil king and the parliament, and they wanted more rights, and they revolted. And finally, the king and the parliament came together with the knights in the area, and they drew up the Magna Carta, which gave human rights under the circumstances to the people in England at that point. And common law is based primarily on the Magna Carta. And the Constitution was set up basically on common law also. The Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution. It was based on common law and the Magna Carta, and also a religious propensity. As Benjamin Franklin said, the U.S. Constitution is for a religious, moral people. It's not for anybody else under the circumstances. And we are not a democracy. When anybody of any sort claims America is a democracy and they're shooting their mouth off, democracy, democracy, they're a fool, idiot, and a moron. America is a representative constitutional republic. It's a vast difference between a republic and a democracy. The next step after democracy is socialism and then communism under the circumstances. And I'm talking lawyers and educators and college professors, the media, everybody shooting their mouth off, democracy, democracy. The founding fathers knew all about democracy. You will not find the word democracy once in the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers. They wanted no part of democracy. They wanted a republic. And that's what we got. But it's being destroyed by the evil among the human beings here that inhabit America under the politicians, the lawyers, and the bureaucrats.
So how would you explain democracy versus the republic, in definition-wise? So people, because I guess democracy, they usually say it's by the people, for the people, so you feel like included.
A republic is a form of government based on the rule of law. The people come together, they elect certain representatives who then formulate laws under the auspices of the people who elected them. They don't put laws in place that the people don't want. They lay a foundation of laws in a republic. And if the people don't like those laws, they get rid of the representatives and they find representatives who will give them laws that are just and equal and ethical and moral. A democracy is mob rule. 51% rule 49% of the people. Now, you have elections in the United States, the national elections. You have an electoral college and you have the popular vote. The founding fathers knew that the popular vote can get out of hand. You can get a mob rule if you're not careful. And the bigger states with the larger population will overwhelm the smaller states with the smaller population. So they put in the electoral college where you have the delegates. You might win the popular vote, but if enough of states and the electoral votes in those states are greater for that person, they're elected the president rather than just on the popular vote. Michigan, California, New Jersey, Massachusetts, New York, these are the big states, the blue states in the country, large populations. Those 5 states alone can determine a presidential election, and all the other 45 states can take a wash that don't have their population. Why did Trump lose the election? Because it was taken away from him. Those 5 or 6 swing states were enough with the popular vote to negate the electoral college that he would have won under the circumstances. So that's all democracy is, mob rule. If you look through the history, the civilization of human life on this planet, and you will see anytime there is mob rule, that is usually democracy or socialism under the circumstances. And that's the main difference. Republic ruled by law. Democracy ruled by the people, the mob. 51% ruling 49%. Or 60-40, whatever you want to do it under. Why do you think there's such a push on making America a democracy when it's not in our Constitution? We're a republic because we want the mob rule. That swings elections. It gets the politicians elected who give in to the mob. Make sense?
Yeah, like the mob's easily propagandable, you know, they can just sway them either way.
All you got to do is give them a 6-pack of beer and a loaf of bread and they'll vote for you. Why do you think that senile is letting 20 million illegals into the country? They're all going to vote for him. You can't take care of our veterans who don't get proper health care at the VA. They got mental, emotional, and physical disabilities, but you give thousands of dollars to these illegal criminals that are coming into the country because they'll vote. They'll vote for the Democrats and the liberals and the leftists.
Yeah, so what would be your ideal kind of form of government? Because nowadays they send like billions to Ukraine and Israel, and it's like nobody really, I don't know if people voted for that, but the populace didn't, you know. So I mean, what is they could just keep passing like random stuff without anybody's consent. and
The,
you're kind of like part of it in a way.
the vast majority of the American people are basically pretty decent under the circumstances, but my observation is that they're struggling day to day to survive, Gilberto, struggling day to day to survive. They don't lack the wherewithal or the energy or the means to do the proper study and education and research that is needed for a particular person before they vote for them. They'll vote for the political party, or they'll vote for the good looks. Oh, Jack Kennedy was so handsome, I'm going to vote for him. Okay?
Mm,
Or the orange man. Oh, God, I can't stand him. He makes me emotionally upset. I'm going to vote for his opponent.
yeah.
Instead of understanding that who you vote for determines what your life is going to be, they're so exhausted, they're so down, so to speak, that they don't do what is needed to ensure that their vote goes to the proper person that's going to represent them. They're exhausted. I understand that. And they find more relief in living on their knees and licking the boots of their enslaver than standing and being punished, possibly, by going free and independent. I wasn't born this way 84 years ago. I had to educate myself my whole life. And as I said, I'm not bragging, I'm not shooting my mouth off. I did it deliberately because this is the type of person I wanted to be. I wanted to be as free and as independent as I possibly can. I'm not a criminal by any mistakes, any extended period here. I've made my mistakes, but I'm not a criminal. But I'm not going to be made a criminal and forced into compliance against what I want to do, how I want to live my life. And everybody should be like that. Everybody should be like that, but most people don't. And the ones that do, that are like me, there's a big movement in this country of people who are fed up, so to speak. And hopefully we'll take America back in November when we vote again. But a lot of them keep it on the quiet side, so to speak, because again, they don't want to be raided, they don't want to be hurt, they don't want to be thrown in jail. As I said, I was arrested 3 times in Florida, and I won every time I was arrested. Oh, I don't shoot my mouth off. I'm not blowing my own horn. I'm not out there running for political office, and I want to educate people. Well, I do on my clients and patients. I'll educate to a certain degree, but it's one-on-one under the circumstances. I'm no Johnny Appleseed out there trying to take America back over, something like that. I keep it very low key. I'm much of a loner. I'm under the radar under the circumstances, but I've done enough that I know how to protect myself, and I'm not going to let anybody push me around under the circumstances. Okay, I was bullied twice as a young kid growing up in Queens. No more, no more. It's not going to happen. No.
Stop there, right? That's great. So, what would you say you've learned? You mentioned knowledge is power. So, what have you learned about, like, you mentioned there's good stuff in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Magna Carta. So, what else have you learned that gives you like this willing to fight for your rights and like not be, like you said, a boot on your neck?
To me, it depends on the type of person that a person wants to be, whatever a man and woman wants to be under the circumstances. Unfortunately, the last 2 generations have been so brainwashed and so manipulated by the colleges and the education system in this country. I mean, these kids, they don't know their ass from their elbow under the circumstances. There's a world of difference between a child that is homeschooled or in the charter schools or even the religious schools. They're getting the proper reading and math and science and arithmetic, this type of situation, instead of how to put a condom on a cucumber, or black history sciences, or what it's like to be transy. Or there's colleges now that are having Taylor Swift studies. They're teaching a course on Taylor Swift study. Who the hell cares? Are you going to have a daughter emulate Taylor Swift? I don't care if she's $1 billion under the circumstances. I don't care. I mean, the parents have got to draw the line somewhere under the circumstances and start educating their children properly at this point. But if the parents are not willing to start researching and coming up with knowledge which gives them power so they can better direct and raise their children and set them on the right path with minimal mistakes, what are these poor kids going to do under the circumstances? You can see these videos, these kids going up there and free Palestine, and that's all they care about, and a transy and non-binary and cisgender or whatever it happens to be. But you ask them the simple question, what's the capital of New York or what's the capital of California? I have no idea. No idea. Who is your representative? Who is your senator? I don't know. I have no idea. They're more concerned about the Mickey Mouse stuff rather than the serious type of stuff. But it boils down to these parents raising their children properly and giving them the right start, so to speak, and then hoping for the best that they'll follow through on it. But you have the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. You can get the pamphlets. I have copies of them in my car and in my truck, and I have read them over and over and over. They're easy read. There's no big words, Gilberto, in those. They're real easy. You don't even need a dictionary to look up those words. The Founding Fathers made it very simple. Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, the Administrative Court. It's simple, easy read. But if a person is not motivated for something of that importance, I can tell them, I can say, hey, look, folks, like I'm doing right now on your podcast here with people, go get a Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, we the people, and just read it. There is no greater document that has been recorded in human history than the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And they took the Magna Carta, they took all of these earlier writings by people, and they enlarged it. They made it more powerful, so to speak, by bringing it in and creating America. America's the great Rome. I've studied Rome for 1,000 or so years. The first 500 years of Rome's existence, they were a republic. And they became corrupted by the Caesar line and democracy, the mob rule. And that's what happens. It was the downfall of Rome. They went from a republic to the Caesar line, democracy, and then kaput, right down the line. And you had everything in Rome that you have going on right now. The homosexuality, the schooling, the whole 9 yards, the illegal immigration into Rome, etc. And the Founding Fathers saw all of this, and that's why they did the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence. They wanted to correct the mistakes that other cultures and civilizations did, and they wanted a more pure form, a republic here, which they established with us. And we've lost the spirituality and the religion. As Benjamin Franklin said to one woman, he said, we gave you a republic. If you can hang on to it, if you can hold on to it, we gave you a republic. But the Constitution of the form of this government that made America was only for a religious-oriented people. It's not for anybody else.
So what religious values do you think these people had? Like Christianity type stuff?
They were all Christians to varying degrees. Some of them were Puritans, some of them were Baptists, some of them were Methodists. There was some Catholics in there, but it was all Christianity. It wasn't Islam or Taoism, which is a Japanese religion, or Buddhism or Hindu or anything of that nature, okay? It was all based on the different denominations of Christianity, the Protestant side and the Catholic side. So they brought those particular values together, even though those different factions of Christianity had discord between them. I mean, they were fighting among themselves. You had the Protestant Reformation, which separated a large part of what the Catholics believed. The Protestants didn't want to go down this thing with the Pope and whatnot under the circumstances. But it was all based on Christianity. America was set up as a religious country religious freedom, not any specific religion like England, which had the Church of England, a specific, no, you could believe the Quakers, the Methodists, you could believe whatever religion you wanted as long as you allowed others to have their own beliefs. But the country is based on a Christian belief religious system. And that's what made it so powerful in the beginning. But when you get away from that, I mean, you're looking at America right now, which it's not the America that it was in 1776 when the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence was brought up. This is a completely different country, completely different. And I don't know if it can get back. I really, truly don't know. Every democracy has ended in either a dictatorship or a tyrant. And if we are truly a democracy rather than a republic anymore, that's the road that we're going to get. And it's just a question of time before somebody takes over and becomes a dictator or a tyrant. Every civilization, every culture went that particular way when they had a democracy. Democracy never, ever survives indefinitely. It always goes down the road of tyranny, dictatorship, fascism, communism, whatever it happens to be. And then you get a revolution, you start all over again.
Yeah, once Gavin Newsom is running for president, we should be scared, you know. But I was gonna also mention the because in the beginning of our country they revolted against the tea tax, right? It was I don't know how much percentage, but it was annoying, right? So to compare it to this dog tax, dog license, it's about the same thing, and I'm surprised people like, I'll link the Reddit post in the description when I upload it. People just like think it's normal and like it. They kind of accept it out of fear. I don't know if they're just gullible.
When a person gets dumbed down, they lose the ability to think that freedom and independence is valuable to them all. Again, they're on their knees, licking their boots. We want to survive. We want to get in front of the boob tube. We want to watch Taylor Swift. We want to have a beer and a pizza, whatever the hell it happens to be. Okay? They're not willing to go the extra step for things that are important to them because they can't see beyond a few minutes or a few seconds or a day. They can't see 6 months down the line or 5 years or 10 years down the line. These kids, what is it, OnlyFans or something like that? These girls that are hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars by showing their nudity or having sex or whatever it is, and they're raking in obscene amounts of money from guys who pay them a monthly subscription. They can't see what they're going to be like in 5 or 10 years as to whether some decent guy is going to want to marry them and make them a wife and a mother of children under the circumstances. They don't have that foresight under the circumstances. The tea, when the patriots and the colonists dressed up as Indians and they threw the tea into the harbor, Boston Harbor, the tea was the governor that was every colonist had a governor appointed by the king and the parliament. And he ruled the dictates coming from England, the king, and the parliament. And the people said, no, you're going to tax the tea, which was very important to these colonists. We want to have representation to say what we want, the percentage of tea, the percentage of tax, whatever it happens to be. We want a voice in that instead of being dictated to. And the governor said, no, no, no. The king said this. The parliament said this. The colonists revolted. That's the first part of the revolution. They said, no, if you're going to do that, screw it. We're going to dump the tea in the harbor. And that probably was one of the first rebellious acts that wound up leading to the revolt, the revolution of the colonists from England. And then that started the Revolutionary War. Fortunately, we won because we had enough patriots who were willing to put their life on the line. And we had a great general, Washington. He pulled off some serious moves in the Battle of Trenton and New York. And he wound up defeating the British Army and the Navy. And then we've got America under the circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty important to have at least a few people that are educated and know what to fight for when it gets really bad, like you mentioned, like some dictatorship. Or I mean, just overall, I don't think it has to get violent either. Like, what do you think people can do to get rid of these kind of licenses or kind of expose what's happening? Like you mentioned, City Hall, is that a really good first step? And explain these things to your local people?
My view and my experience has been, I don't change the system. I can't change the system. I'm not interested in changing the system. I don't want to run for political office. I don't want to be responsible for people, okay, to control them and whatever it happens to be. I go one-on-one with my clients, my patients, the owners of the animals, the parents of children, and my adult patients at this point. I go one-on-one to educate them as best I possibly can. And when I get calls, people saying, I heard about you, I read the article on the rabies, and I'm stuck now. Animal control is coming after me for my animal. They want to take it away from me. What can I do? I'll educate them as best I possible. I'll give them the resources. Like I said, if you go find out how many animals had rabies for that year, whether they're dogs, cats, raccoons, skunks, bats, whatever it happens to be, and then make a decision. And then you have to decide, do you want to go free to this particular degree? If you do, this is what you do. A, B, C, D. This is what you do to go free. And then you become a good pet owner. Keep your dog on the leading collar when you go out for a walk. Don't let it go to the bathroom on your neighbors. Get the tag that looks the color and the shape of a rabies, okay? Be a responsible pet owner. Fly under the radar. And there's more and more and more people doing that under the circumstances. There is, I don't know if you're, I'm sure you have to be familiar with this, Gilberto, but there's a tsunami underneath America as far as the people are concerned. They're fed up with these lawyers and the politicians and the Kennedys and the Bidens and the Obamas and the influx of these 20 million, the rape and murder, the diseases, the drugs, everything else that is coming into this country because of these treasonous humans that are put in power under the circumstances. And if you look, and I've studied quite extensively all the cultures and civilizations on this planet to varying degrees. Every one of them reached a boiling point, and it was like a flash point where you took one little incident and that set those people off, and they had a revolution. The war between the states, the war of northern aggression, that was not a civil war. The South did not want to have any part of the federal government. They wanted their own freedom. What was the flashpoint? The flashpoint was the firing on Fort Sumter in the harbor of South Carolina. Lincoln, he deserved to get a bullet in his head, that SOB, for what he did to America. And that might get me in trouble. I don't care. He set the Southerners up. He could have capitulated that fort to the South. All they wanted was the federal troops to get the hell out of the fort. You see all these things I'm bringing up. I've researched all of this stuff. All they had to do was take the federal troops out of the fort, send them back to Washington or wherever you want to have, and turn the fort over to the South. The South probably would not have revolted under those circumstances. But when Lincoln refused to, that set up the bombardment, and that broke the back, and we went into the Civil War. Not the Civil War, the War of Northern Aggression against the South. What was the thing that set this? The tea factor. The colonists threw the tea into the Boston Harbor. There's these little sparks of protest. The people have had enough, and you just push them so far, and it doesn't take much for that spark to set off the explosion, and then you have a revolution. You have an upheaval, civil war, whatever you want to call it under the circumstances. And it's always been that same. It's always been that same. It's amazing what the human population will take. You can push them and push them, and they'll push them, and they'll take so much, but then the littlest thing will set them off, and then you have the revolution and whatever else it happens to be. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, it's funny that cat licenses are optional, because I think they know that there's cat ladies out there with like 5 cats and 6 cats, and that's, who's going to pay the yearly licenses? But it's just nonsensical at some point. Like, would you have any type of pet, you have to have a license for them? You kind of have to start questioning it,
Well, the cat is easy. The cat is a house cat unless you're irresponsible and let your cat out and roam, which you should never do. All my cats, they were house cats. I never let them out unless I was stupid enough to leave the garage door open and then they escaped on me. But that's on me. That wasn't on the cat. The cats you can keep in the house. So how does somebody know that you have a cat? You open your mouth and you tell people you have a cat or cats, or some way, somehow they come into your house and they see the cats. Oh, I'm going to be a Karen, so to speak, and I'm going to report you to animal control. The dog is a different story. Most dogs are either in the yard, even if they're kept on the property, or you walk them. You take them to a park, let them run, jump, get some exercise, go on a trail with you, whatever it happens to be. Then for God's sakes, be a responsible pet owner. Don't let them bite or traumatize or show any aggression under the circumstance. Make sure that you have your dog under control at all times, and then get a tag that looks like a rabies tag. And as long as you are responsible, fly under the radar, it's very unusual for a person to get in trouble, a pet owner to get in trouble. The ones that get in trouble, they let their dogs run loose. They go to the bathroom on the neighbor's lawn. They tear up the roses, or they jump on the children, threatening the children, scaring them. It's these type of people that give the rest of them a bad rep, so to speak. And that's when you get the law coming into play. If you fly under the radar, if you do a little bit of what I've said over the years in this interview, or even with the rabies article, you don't usually have much problem, to be honest with you. And particularly you say, hey, look, I've studied the law. This is you had no dogs or cats rabies this year, blah, 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 blah. Now, you want to take me into court? I'll go into court and I'll fight you. The vast majority of the bureaucrats and the politicians, if you indicate to them that you're willing to fight and you mean it, and they perceive that you mean it, most of them don't want to bother. Okay, they're looking for easy pickings. You know this as well as I do. Okay, they're looking for the ones that'll capitulate easily and follow the company line, pay the tax, whatever it is. Anybody that's going to fight, they won't do it under the circumstances. Okay,
It's kind of like a bully or the mafia. They'll try to extort somebody who is not going to kill them, or like who's not going to, you know.
let me give you an example if I can, and hopefully this is all right. The second reason I was arrested in Florida, for almost 6 years, I had no insurance, no license. I went to Kinko and I made up tags on the Florida license, okay? I drove for 6 years out of the system. I got nailed and I spent a day and a half in jail, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I had 4 charges against me, thousands of dollars of fine, 1 year in jail. Every one of them, the first 3 were wiped out, nothing, no points, no fine, nothing. The last one was altering the tag on the license in Kinko. I got the dairy tag, okay. I was brilliant. I was absolutely brilliant. I was so proud of myself for doing this. That was 1 year in jail. I paid $200 and I walked out of that courtroom free. And I got copies of all the adjudication in the courtroom between the ADA and the judge, who was a piece of work. He had no business being a judge. I put all that paperwork in the glove compartment of my car. I didn't change a thing, Gilbert. Not a thing. I drove for the next year exactly the same way. One night, 2 cops in Clearwater Police Department pulled me over. I got arrested. I'm standing at night, late at night, off the highway in a parking lot, handcuffed. I'm going to jail for the 3rd time. True story. I said, guys, you can put me in jail. I'm going to win. I'm going to get out. Go to my glove compartment. Last year, I went through everything that you're giving me tickets for at this particular point. Get the paperwork out of the courtroom 104. Get it and look over it. I won. I beat all of these things. You want to give me the tickets? You want to take me to jail? Please do so. I'm still going to beat you on this. The 2 of the guys looked at one another. And one guy was a sergeant. He said, I'm not screwing around with him. I'm not going to bother with this. He takes the handcuffs off me, gives me the tickets. He says, I'm going to let the court system handle you. And they drove away. True story.
So what do you have to, like, you learned obviously some stuff. You mentioned the book about Social Security fraud, or that it's a big fraud or something like that. What do you call this stuff? Like just skipping, like outsmarting the system? Like, do they have loopholes set up in there? Because I know sometimes they talk about like exemptions, like there's always an exemption in the law or something.
What I did in my life and what I try to teach people when the opportunity occurs or when they ask me is, Do you want to be part of the system that is enslaving people, the citizens of this country? If you do, fine and dandy. You don't bother with me. There's a system in place. The question is, how do you fit within the system? If you don't like some aspects of your fitting into the system, then get yourself out of the system. There's ways of doing it. When I read those two books from cover to cover, there's only so much I'm going to say on this here because, again, I'm not going to put myself at risk. I got the IRS tax code, okay, that thick book. And I looked in the IRS tax code, every chapter, subchapter, sub-subchapter that was in those two particular books that proved the 2 points of those books, that it's a voluntary system for paying Social Security, 1040s, and paying federal tax. It's voluntary, okay? I looked it all up. You can go on the internet right now, make sure you keep filters in place. You can go and get the copy of the IRS tax code. Let's look at wages. Let's look at wages, okay? It's defined under the law as an exchange of labor. You say, I want you to clean my house, Fudens, for 1 hour, and I'm going to give you $10 for that. I've exchanged 1 hour of my time, energy, and labor. You give me a piece of paper for $10. That is wages. That is defined under the IRS tax code. Now, you look at income. What is income? If I take that $10 and I spend $8 of it for my expenses for that day, I have $2 left over. I take those $2 and I invest them in stocks and bonds, annuities, mutual funds, treasury bills, gold, silver, gemstones. I invest those $2 in other substances in hope that it will make me more money. So after a period of time, that $2 grows to $4. That $2 is income. It's not wages, it's income. The Constitution was set up, and it's still there. There's only 2 forms of taxation, indirect and direct. Now, what is indirect taxation? A sales tax. Here's an apple. If you buy the apple, you're going to pay a sales tax on it. If you don't buy the apple, you're not paying a tax. The tax is voluntary. Buy the product with tax or don't buy it. Now, a direct tax is this is a tax that's directly proportionate among the population. Suppose there's a village that has a tax bill of $100, and there's 10 people in the village. 10 into 100 is $10. Every one of those 10 people have to pay $10 to settle the tax bill of the village. That is a direct tax based on the population in that area. You with me so far? Those are the only 2 taxes in the Constitution.
Wow.
Now, you come to the 16th Amendment of the Constitution, 16th Amendment passed in 1913. It's the Federal Income Tax Amendment. It's not the Federal Wage Tax Amendment, the Federal Income Tax Amendment. You with me so far? You go to the IRS tax code. They define wages properly. They define income properly. Income is annuities, Social Security, investments, blah, blah, blah. But they also include wages and income. Here, it's right in the book. Now, how in God's name can you define wages, income separately, and then put wages into the income? It's a scam. And people don't pick up on it. They've never, the courts will not hear cases in this respect, Roberto, okay? They won't. As to how you can take wages as a separate option, income as a separate, and then put wages into the income. And they only did that because people don't know the differences between them and assume that their wages are income, so I have to pay a tax on it. The 16th Amendment was a new taxation, and the Supreme Court, they don't touch it. They only had maybe 2 or 3 cases on that amendment, and then they don't take any other cases on it. Any cases that come before them on the 16th Amendment, they won't take it up. They lower it, they refer it back to the district or the appellate court. It established a new form of taxation, an income tax. Not a wage, not a direct tax, not a wage, not an indirect, an income tax. But to make sure they get total compliance, they had to violate their own laws and rules and regulations, and they included wages into income. If income is defined a certain way and wages are defined a certain way, how can you put wages in income? That's like saying up is down and down is up. No, you have two different things. If you're up, if you're down. Two completely different things. It's there. I'm not going to look up on the internet the tax code and you'll see it. Now, where did they get the power to do that? They got the power of the gun. They got the power of the gun. They can penalize and punish people if they don't obey.
Yeah, that's ultimately what the fear, right? Fear is how people stay in line.
The one, if you want to control a person, there's one emotion that works more than anything else. That is fear. That is fear. You have three ways of, I don't want to say, you have three ways of controlling a person. Number one, educate them, teach them. Seminars, books, reading. Give them the knowledge of the truth so that person can then be free or to make whatever decisions they want. The second way is to punish them. Make a law. If you don't do this, I'm going to put you in jail. I'm going to fine you. I'm going to punish you. The tax code is voluntary, but if you don't volunteer, we're going to punish you. We're going to fine you and throw you in jail. So punishment is the second way. The third is fear. If you don't do this, you're going to die. You're going to get sick. You're going to get cancer. Do you see?
Rabies.
You're going to get rabies. You're going to get COVID. Do you see what happened with COVID several years ago? A mass. Here in North Idaho, I must have been the same. We had people driving around in their car alone. The windows are up with a mask on, Gilbert, with a mask on in their car with the windows up. You're going to get sick. If you don't wear a mask, wash your hands, practice 6 feet. If you don't get the vaccines, at first it was 1 or 2 vaccines. Now it's up to 5 to 6 boosters. I treated a number of people during that time. I had contacts around the world with homeopaths. We were comparing notes about the COVID and the problems and the vaccines at this particular point. Hundreds of millions of people got sick and died from the vaccines, not from the virus. You give them ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, those 2 drugs. Ivermectin is an animal wormer. I had men in the hospital on respirators dying, and their wives gave them on the sly, didn't tell anything about the nurses and doctors, and their husbands recovered because they were given ivermectin and some of these other animal wormers. But no, you can't do that with conventional medicine. Oh no, we don't have any scientific evidence of that.
Can you explain the difference? There's a big, I guess, split in the path of medicine. I guess there's conventional, and then there's, I don't know, a holistic or a homeopathic type stuff. Where the other one, the conventional one, I guess people say that it's controlled and, I don't know, it's very invasive and just for profit in some type of way. And the other one is more focused on like finding a cause and treating it type stuff.
All right. Conventional medicine for people or animals is based on surgery, drugs, and radiation. X-ray, okay? I was a vet for 25 years, so I know what I'm talking about, okay? And I've done enough people to know what MDs do to them at this point. Conventional medicine is based on symptoms. You put a name on the symptom. You have diabetes. Here's the insulin for the rest of your life. Now I have control over you. I've given you a name. That makes me feel better. I know I have diabetes. Okay, now I know I need insulin for the rest of my life. I'm going to have to pay a small fortune until I die to get the needles and the syringe and the insulin. But now we have control over you because we have the insulin and the needles, and you need a prescription. So conventional medicine is based on symptoms. Symptoms is not the disease, and it's not based on a patient. We don't look at a patient, we look at test results. We look at a symptom, an itch. We look at diarrhea. We look at a boil. We look at a growth. Holistic medicine says, I'm making very simple. We're a spiritual being in a physical body, but we have what is called a vital force. It's an energy that controls the body, keeps it functionally proper. We're based on patience, on life, not symptoms. When a person holistically has a symptom, this is my job, I do this over 40 years as a homeopath. When a person presents themselves, their child, or their animal to me with different symptoms, what I know is that vital force has been damaged some way, somehow. When you damage the vital force, that damage causes the vital force to produce a symptom to try to heal the body of that damage and get rid of it. The body is a car. That car will sit for eternity and do nothing but rot unless what happens? A driver gets into that car. When you see a body in a morgue, in a casket, in the ground, on a slab, in the morgue, what's missing from it? Life is missing from it. Us as a spiritual being and the vital force. If your car is bald tires, broken down fan belt, no batteries, glass is broken, it's dirty, the upholstery is written, do you swear at the car and kick it because it's looking that particular way? It's no, the car is not alive. It's the driver of the car, the owner of the car, that's responsible for the car. You with me so far?
Yes.
So when anything goes wrong holistically, even conventionally, it's the vital force that's the problem because it's been damaged and it's responding to damage in the body to try to get rid of it. The vaccines, the drugs, the lousy food, the poisons, the chemicals, whatever it happens to be. That damages the body. It's called chronic degenerative disease. In homeopathy, that's the only disease you have, that I have. Anybody going to listen to this podcast, you have chronic degenerative disease. All life has it. It's how we lived our life from a very detrimental point of view. We don't get sick from love, hugs, and kisses. We get sick from the negativity of life. That causes the damage to the body and the vital force. And then the natural response is produce a symptom. The symptom only leads a homeopath or a holistic practitioner to try to understand what that damage is, where it is, and what the vital force needs to repair the damage, which is homeopathy, the energy of homeopathy. You have a cause and effect. Conventional medicine depends and looks at only the cause because that's where they make their money on. If my thumb is swollen, broken, bleeding, painful, what's the problem? If I try to bandage and put foam rubber and everything on this thumb, it's not going to work if I'm still whacking it with a hammer. The cause of my thumb's problem is hitting it with a hammer. If I stop hitting it with the hammer, then I can heal the thumb. So that's what homeopathy does, a holistic approach. Stay away from the vaccines, better diet, get out of a lousy relationship, quit your job if you're unhappy, go on the internet, take courses, take training. Here's homeopathic remedy. Here's some herbs. Here's some glandulas. We're working towards the cause, which is the vital force being damaged and the body being damaged, and now we have to repair that damage. We don't care about names on symptoms under the circumstances. You could have 10 people, 10 animals with a sore throat. Each one of them will get a completely different remedy because you're dealing with 10 different life forms. Even though they have a sore throat, the throat will be different among the 10 of them. And a homeopathic remedy is based on the patient, what they're showing you with symptoms, which tells the homeopath what remedy needs to be given, the energy that's in a remedy. You want me to give you the best example I could give you that turned my head as a veterinarian when I became a homeopath?
Sure, and I think I have also an example of a situation I was in.
Okay. I was a conventional veterinarian. This was in 81. I started studying homeopathy on my own. I got some books. Prior to that, I studied and trained and used in my hospital every type of holistic therapy. But I got books on homeopathy, started reading about it, and I got a few remedies and low potencies, different types of remedies. One day in my hospital, I walk into the exam room, and there's this 3-4 pound Yorkshire Terrier lying dead on my exam room. And I turned to my tech. I said, "What's a dead dog doing on my exam table?" And doctor, the dog's not dead. There's no brain reflex. You couldn't see the breathing. The little body was cold as an ice cube. I put a scope on, and all of a sudden there's 5 beats of the heart per minute. Very low. For all intents and purposes, that dog was dead. It was seconds or a few minutes away from dying. It was a female, and she had pyometra. That's a pus infection in the uterus, which was absorbed into the bloodstream, causing septicemia, and she was in septic shock, dying. The treatment, of course, is surgery. You have to remove the organ, fluids, antibiotics, all sorts of drugs to try to save them. But she could have died any second on me. I explained this to the owners. The whole family's in the exam room crying. They're hysterical. They want me. I said, I can't save her. There's no way she's going to last through the surgery. Long story short, they convinced me to try to save her. So I had my staff take her into the treatment area to prep her up for surgery. I got an IV into her. I'm running lactated ringers, antibiotics, vitamins and minerals, and other therapies. And I had to prep her for surgery. We put her into the operating room on a heating pad to get some warmth into her. Now, normally I would give a general anesthesia, but this dog is seconds away from dying. There's no way I can give her a general anesthesia, but I was not going to open that little dog up without doing something. So I took lidocaine, which is a local injection, and this was for me. It was not for the dog. I injected the surgical line, okay, with lidocaine. I opened her up, and that uterus was like this, as big as Italian sausage. Anyhow, I got it all out. We put her in recovery, closed her up. We put her in recovery. She's on a heating pad, the fluids, the antibiotics, blah, blah, blah. She did not make one sound. She didn't move. There was not one change in that little dog, Gilberto, and this is a true story. So then I started working my exam rooms, and let me go back a little bit. I went to one of my books, and I found this remedy. It's called Cabo Vegetalis. It's a remedy made from burning of vegetables. That seems pretty silly, but that's what it is under the circumstances. Homeopathy is made from many, many, many substances on this planet. I took a little pellet that had a very low potency, and I put it under her tongue, closed the cage door, and then I worked my exam rooms. About a half hour later, I said, let me go in and check. Fully expected her to have died. I opened the recovery room. She's standing. Her tongue is out of her mouth. She's weaving back and forth like a drunken sailor. She wags her little tail when she sees me. True story. True story. The next day she went home. She lived for 2 more years. I have told this story over and over and over again. My mouth hit the floor. My staff couldn't, I had 5 staff working for me in the hospital, couldn't believe it under the circumstances. To this day, I did not save that dog. Homeopathy did. That remedy gave that vital force enough energy to start the recovery of that body that was so sick and toxic. The air removing the infected uterus, the fluids, the antibiotics, the vitamin, all of that played a part. There's no question about that. But I have not the slightest doubt that if I had not given that little pellet to that dog, sooner or later I would have found her dead. She was not going to come back from that particular state, no matter what I did. That is a true story. And I've got very similar stories, many, many of them like this with both people, children, and animals. But that is the day that I knew that I was going to be a homeopath, and that was the day that I knew that I was going to sell everything out, which I did in '89, and walk away from conventional medicine. That's a true story.
Oh, that's amazing. So are you trying to, is there pretty much saying that like homeopathy is being open to other medicines, that maybe conventional medicine, it's not in the book somehow, kind of like you mentioned the horse tranquilizer for COVID. Joe Rogan took it and he promoted it and people made fun of him, but kind of going outside of the accepted norm of looking to like plant-based stuff, nature type things.
To me, and I've lectured on this also, to me, health is like a mountain. It's like a mountain, okay? Health, a mountain, big mountain. At the very base of the mountain, before you even start climbing the mountain, there's nutrition. That's the basis of health. Eating well, balanced meals under the sun, whether it's a dog, cat, a horse, a cow, or a human being or a child. The diet is the basis. Now, when you start to climb the mountain, that's when the other energetic forms of holistic therapy come into play. East and Western herbs, glandular extracts, vitamins and minerals, dowsing with a pendulum, acupressure, acupuncture, chiropractic, massage therapy, magnetism, electromagnetism, radionics, and then up at the very top is homeopathy. And everything I talk to you, I studied and trained and used in my hospital for 17 years when I was making the transition from conventional vet medicine over to homeopathy. There is no higher, greater energetic therapy on the planet than homeopathy. All the others are very, very important, but they don't reach the vital force to the degree that the energy of homeopathy does. So there are practitioners that start at the base and they go up certain ways, this type of stuff. They're fine. I have nothing wrong. I work with other therapies if it's indicated for whatever patient problem that I'm dealing with at this point, and I'll work with other holistic therapists and practitioners. But homeopathy is the king. That sits up there in the top. Anything I use in addition to homeopathy has to support homeopathy. It cannot interfere with homeopathy or my understanding how that life form responds to homeopathy.
So you mentioned in homeopathy, like this thing called the life force, and it's kind of like a central thing, right? So is that just our soul? Like, well, how would you, is our like animation, like our consciousness? I don't know.
I normally don't go down this road. There's a couple of things I don't normally talk about is politics and religion, but I'm going to keep it out of those spheres. Basically, we're more complex than what I'm going to say, but I'm going to try to keep it simple. We are a spiritual being. Now, we don't have a soul. We are the soul. I've had this talk with rabbis, priests, ministers, religionists, this type of thing. A person will say to me, well, my soul is here and it's going to heaven and my soul is this and my soul is that. I said, okay, you have a soul? Oh, yeah, I have a soul. I said, if you have a soul, then who are you? Who are you? I get two reactions. They shut down. I mean, you can just see them shut right down. Or maybe after a bit, they'll stumble and say, well, I guess I'm the soul. I said, that's right. You are this. You cannot have yourself, Gilberto. You are yourself. You cannot have yourself. I can have this pad. I can have this cup. I'm not the pad and I'm not the cup. I'm a soul or a spiritual being in a physical existence. There's this body sitting in front of you. The life force in homeopathy is what is called the vital force, the genetic entity, the simple substance, the chi. They have different names for this, but it's basically separate from who we are as a spiritual being in a physical existence. Does that make sense? You got two physical bodies here communicating via technology, but we're both spiritual beings in this body communicating with one another on a physical plane to exchange ideas and information. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it's kind of the spirit. It's kind of your physical. It's your spirit, but in this realm.
The vital force, the genetic entity, the chi, the simple substance, it's like who we are as a spiritual being or as a soul, but it's different. It's different. There's two things that give life to the physical form: the spirit soul, and then the vital force or the life energy, so to speak. People tend to confuse the two inappropriately, and that's why they have trouble understanding something of this nature. The same as people will confuse the brain and the mind. Two completely different subjects. Two completely different subjects. The brain is not the mind and vice versa. And I try to correct that when I give my talks and my lectures under the circumstances. And when I talk about homeopathy, I try to stay away from the spirituality or the soul that we are, because that tends to lead into religion. And then you can have a whole mishmash of talking religion to most people at this point. So then it's called in homeopathy the vital force, but it has these other names. It's like us, who we are as a spiritual beings or soul, but it's also completely different. And it's soul. Here's the example. The body is the car. The driver of the car, the chauffeur of the car, is the vital force, the genetic entity, the simple substance. Who is the spiritual being soul? That's the guy sitting in the back seat reading the Wall Street Journal. I know it's a crude example, but I try to give this type of answer. It's pretty much right on point, Gilberto. Okay, the car, the chauffeur, the driver, and then the big honcho, the CEO, sitting in the back seat that can direct everything or let the chauffeur take the car to the work or wherever it's going. And it's homeopathy that treats that chauffeur, the driver of the car, which is the vital force treating the physical body. And it works. It's been there for hundreds of years, and it works. There's not many homeopaths on the planet. I mean, maybe 5 to 10,000, considering there's, what, 8 billion people or something of that particular nature. But homeopathy works. And the reason it's perceived as such a danger is because it does work, and it treats the person, not the symptoms. We go for a cure. We don't go for a suppression or just putting a Band-Aid on a symptom, so to speak, like giving insulin injections. Sometimes they're necessary, but if you can cure why the pancreas is not producing the insulin, or the cells are not taking up the insulin, if you can cure that, do you need injections of insulin? Do you then have a diabetic state? No, you don't.
It's kind of like nowadays they say that obesity is a genetic disease or something, and that you could take Ozempic, or like you can't. It's not like eating won't change anything. Like if you eat less, you won't lose weight. I don't know, but I guess it is more difficult for some people. But in general, like they're trying to push drugs on people a lifetime, right, for the rest of their lives.
It's misinformation. It's false data. Okay, they want to push drugs under the circumstances. They want to push vaccines. Let me tell you something. I would go for any vaccine that can cure human stupidity. If they had a vaccine for human stupidity, I'm on board. I would inject everybody on the planet that I could get a needle into. If they had a vaccine that would cure stupidity of the human race. They have a vaccine for cancer. They have a vaccine for obesity. No, 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 no. These things are not handled by vaccination. There's a genetic component to a lot of things, but conventional is based on money. It's based on money. There's not a rich homeopath on this planet. No, I'm serious. We don't make I was loaded with money as a conventional veterinarian. I had more money than I knew what the hell to do with.
Can you mention the income that a conventional veterinarian gets? I think your article mentioned it's a lot from the mandatory vaccinations. What else? I guess they do sometimes like fix dogs and treat them.
You're talking well into six figures as a veterinarian, and the MDs are even more than that. But as I'm saying, a homeopath is not filthy rich. We don't get the money because we don't have the tests, the surgery, the drugs, and all of this other stuff. But homeopath is not, I don't know, I've never met a homeopath that went into homeopathy for money. They go into it because we can make a difference with life, people and animals. We can cure them, we can help them. And if we can't cure them, we can make them have better quality and quantity of health and life compared to what conventional medicine can do with their drugs or the surgery, whatever it happens to be. You can cut a cancer out. You have not cured that life of cancer. Why was the cancer there in the first place? With the rabies, the sarcoma from the vaccine. And a lot of the cancers are caused by vaccines, plus a lot of other things. But we are based on patient care, health, curing, making things better, not suppressing it by using drugs or surgery or radiation and putting a name on a symptom under the circumstances.
Yeah, because I was going to tell you my example was that I had I guess symptoms of a clogged nose, and I eventually believed or got myself to believe that it was a deviated septum. So I looked up a local ears, nose, and mouth doctor, and essentially they told me like right away, oh yeah, that's the worst case I've ever seen, and it was kind of weird. But then he just sent me like the little paper. It was gonna be like $3,000 or something. So I just walked out of there. I thought about it, waited, and like videos came up about like people sleeping with mouth tape, and that helps you breathe through your nose and it opens up your nasal passages normally. Joe Rogan had like some interviews about it, and basically, yeah. And there's like a Dr. Mew. He mentions like putting your tongue on the roof of your mouth so that it expands your nasal cavities or something. Something expands up there, like your palate. And yeah, a bunch of people like he's also against like traditional orthodontics, where because he believes they're lying to people. They don't want to. He says basically closing your mouth and chewing hard foods will fix a lot of dental issues, something like that. But it's some very similar. Like there's a conventional way to do it. People are fighting like a lot of money involved, and then there's people that the solution is very cheap, very like easy, and it's not profitable. So, but they give it out there.
But you were in the holistic field to varying degrees. If you had known at that time to sort out a constitutional classical homeopath like I am, who could have worked with you with homeopathy, that would have he or she would have come up with a remedy that would have taken care of whatever the symptom was going on in there by giving energy to the vital force to go into the nasal turbinates, the sinuses, whatever it is, rearrange things, reduce the swelling, whatever it happens to be, and then you would have been able to breathe and not have this particular function anymore. But you were in the holistic field. You just didn't go high enough up the mountain. That's all.
Yeah, I probably still have to keep going higher. I gotta look into it. And is there anything else you want to mention, like maybe about your past and seeing like the bad things and animal control? Because I mean, I'm sure they're great people. I mean, obviously they see bad stuff like animals dying every day, and it's not good. And people should adopt and take care of their animals more.
There were a number of reasons why I walked away from conventional medicine, because I was not helping the animals to the degree that I wanted to help them as a little kid growing up on the streets of Queens, and with the slaughterhouse that I saw and taking care of my sick grandmother, this type of thing. One of the biggest reasons why I walked away was I had put so many animals down. I had put so many animals to sleep, and it bothered me every time I did that. Every time I did that, because I was helpless to go for any further with surgery or the drugs, whatever it happens to be. And as I said, I've had a number of God, looking for a word. I've had a number of situations where my life was changed dramatically, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it happens to be. And I was out 8 years as a veterinarian in my hospital. And I had this German Shepherd that was totally paralyzed in the back end, spinal arthritis, hip dysplasia. I mean, it was like two different dogs were put together. And I couldn't treat the dog any further. He was not responding to the drugs. He was in a state of dying. And to alleviate his pain, I had to put him to sleep. I had to inject that anesthetic into him that stopped the heart. And as I'm doing that, and I love that dog. He was just a great dog. He wasn't mine. But as I'm doing that, he's licking my hand as I'm killing him. I couldn't get out of that room fast enough, and I started crying because of what I did to that dog. Yeah, he was suffering. It was not fair to let him go any further, put him out of his misery. I could come up with all sorts of justifications that I want, but I still killed that dog no matter what the reason happens to be. And as I said, I have treated many, many thousands of animals that walk, fly, swim, and crawl. I still treat them. And I have put, God, must have been hundreds of animals that walk, fly, swim, and crawl to sleep. Birds, reptiles, snakes, you name it, large animals, small animals. And every time I had to do that, it took a piece of me out. I lost a piece of me under the circumstances. And once I saw the difference with homeopathy, like with that little pup, that little dog here, I said, no, okay, that's it. I'm out of this game. And when I sold, and I have not put an animal to sleep since then under the circumstances, because I don't have to do it with them. I can use homeopathy to keep them going, and then let them go on their own accord with homeopathy. But that's one of the reasons. There were other reasons, the vaccine issue and the cancers from the rabies and whatnot. But euthanizing those animals, I lost a little bit every time I had to do it. I couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it could be very tough, and I know a lot of women like to, like, as a little girl, they say, I want to become a vet because they care about animals, but to know that's what they're gonna have to be doing most of the time, it's kind of sad.
Well, euthanasia, and one of the things as a teenager, when I decided for sure that I was going to be a veterinarian, I had to look at the possibility that at times I would have to hurt an animal to help them. I would have to operate on them, suture them. I would have to do something to them that might cause some pain and discomfort temporarily to get them on the other side of repairing them from what the damage was. And I had to look at that. I really did have to look at that. Was I prepared to hurt an animal when it was necessary, if hurting them was long range to save them and recover them from the damage? And I struggled with that for a little bit. And I'm not saying I decided that I wasn't going to be a vet. I did decide, and I followed through on it. But that's one thing. Before I became a vet, I had to struggle with that possibility. I mean, am I prepared? Was I built enough to hurt these animals at times when necessary, if that meant to save them? And that sometimes is a struggle. And I'm sure there are MDs that go through the same type of thing when they have a human patient in the hospital where they have to do something, and they're going to inflict some pain or discomfort, but to get them out of that and then get them on the other side and repair them from what is needed.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a lot of, even like vegans, you have to think about how far can you go to, people try to their best to not hurt animals, right? That's their philosophy, kind of respect everything. But how would you consider, like, if somebody has a dying dog, like, you mentioned you don't euthanize anymore. Is it just to, like, let them live their life how they are until they die, kind of with that peace or something?
When you have an animal, we'll say terminal, and this is to a certain degree even with people, you have three possibilities of handling end stage to death situation. Number one, you can let that life form linger and die on their own accord. Sooner or later, the body vital forces will give out, and the body will die, and then the spiritual soul will leave. There may be a certain amount of pain and discomfort. That's the whole purpose of hospice, where they have the morphine pump, keep the person on morphine to keep them comfortable until finally they decide to leave. Although there are certain countries in the world that practice euthanasia, where you can take a certain cocktail of drugs where you don't want to suffer at the end, and you can wind up actually killing yourself legally rather than with a gun or poison, something like that. So number one, you can let life take its course, however arduous that may be. The second way, of course, is to, in the case of the animals, the euthanasia solution. It's an anesthetic that's very, very concentrated. And what it does is it stops the heart and the brain activity. And I mean, once you inject it in, it only takes a few seconds, 3, 4, 5 seconds, and that animal is gone. There's a third way, which I have done, and I don't like to say anything about it, and I'm very reticent about it, and I don't say much, and I don't indicate, but there are certain homeopathic remedies that I can use and that I have used to give to that life form, where they take that energy and they make the transition on their own, minimizing the suffering and the pain and the discomfort, if that makes sense. I will give that homeopathic remedy to the life force, the vital force of the spiritual being, and then they take that and they leave on their own accord rather than waiting for them to occur. I know that may sound a little bit unusual and maybe hard to accept, but that's the reality. The same as that remedy called Veg brought that little dog back from dying. I don't like to say this. I don't promote it, but I do if the need arises. I never tell anybody what I'm doing or the remedy, because I don't want them going out and buying the remedy or getting a hold of it or whatever it is. But there's a number of remedies that any homeopath can give, but it's just something that we have the ability to do when the need arises, but we don't promote it and we don't talk about it. And roughly, that's basically all I'm going to say on it. But those are the three ways of easing a spiritual being, the soul, out of the body that's diseased.
Okay, and thank you for mentioning that you don't usually talk about it. I mean, from my understanding, it seems like it's giving the life force more choice in the matter of leaving this realm. And I mean, that's what I got. Maybe I'm wrong, but if you want to elaborate, but if not,
No,
is there anything else you want to?
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. You're absolutely correct on the situation. You're giving that life form the opportunity to make the decision when they're going to transition by giving them enough energy. By giving them enough energy. And very crudely put, it's like putting gas in the car or the truck so you can go to another place under the circumstances. That's all it happens to be. So you're absolutely right. You're giving their life form and energy to make their own decision on when they're going to drop this diseased body. And that, to me, is the way it should be going. But then you get into politics or religion, and you get a lot of people don't understand this. They can't wrap their mind around it. They don't want to understand it under the circumstances. So I tend not to talk much about it, but I will do it when the time comes. And I'll just, as an example, I'll explain it to the owners of the animal. And I've not, when I'm presented with a situation like that, I've never had an animal owner refuse under the circumstances. They don't want to go to the vet. They don't want to give them the needle to kill the body with the anesthetic. And they're a little bit uncomfortable in watching their pets suffer at the very end, trying to make the transition alone. So they're more than willing to take the energy of a homeopathic remedy to help them ease it out. And it does work. Every time I've used it, it does work.
Yeah, and this is only in that terminal scenario, right? So is there anything else you want to touch on, like that you think is really important?
Well, again, I'll go back to please look up vaccinosis and the rabies miasm. And if people want to know more about homeopathy, there's a whole wealth of information on the internet, but they can go to the National Center for Homeopathy. That's the main homeopathic organization in the country, if not the world. And I mean, I'm in there, I'm put in there, but you can find all sorts of homeopaths around every country in the world. If you are in certain areas and all the states, so to speak, people who are using homeopathy for wellness. So if you wish to go to homeopathy and even know more about it, they give the website will give you all sorts of instructions and information on homeopathy, how it works, the terminologies that we've used here at this point. But it's an excellent, excellent site. The National Center for Homeopathy. They have magazines and whatnot, and about people, about children, about animals, and it's if you want to get your feet wet with homeopathy and understand it more than what I've just been able to explain, that's the place to go.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. John Fudens. I appreciate you coming in and trying to educate people on what's really going on and how we could, fight back little by little, and maybe, like you mentioned, not involve ourselves too much in that control system and fight back and however we can.
Well, thank you for having me, Gilberto, and thank you for having your podcast and your organization, whatever it is, and you're trying to reach out and help people and to teach them something at this particular nature. So well done for you. And if I can ever be of help to you again, you know how to get in touch with me. Just let me know. And all the best with you, with your organization and your podcast.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Dr. Fudens. I appreciate it, and have a good rest of your day. And I'll reach out to you if I ever need you, and hopefully vice versa.
Anytime, Gilberto. Have a nice day.
Okay, thank you. You too. Bye-bye.